I'm joined by Kanthan Shankar, who's the country manager for the World Bank in Burma. Mr. Shankar, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Now, the World Bank is funding a school's grants program and stipends program worth in total of $100 million. This will go towards an existing government initiative. But can you tell me what the World Bank money will go towards and how the dollars will be allocated?
This is, as you rightly point out, this is a government program. And the World Bank financing and the other donor financing is an additionality to an existing program. And we have worked in other countries in this in school grants, providing grants to schools and also these stipend schemes, mainly benefiting the poor kids, and give them scholarships, better facilities, school facilities. So we have seen that these similar programs and have worked in other countries, and so we are bringing that knowledge and experience to bear to help the programs which the government is undertaking to make it better, to serve kids, primary education in particular, with better facilities, and also poorer kids benefit through this type of program. It's over 100,000 poorer kids will be benefiting, and as a whole, it's over 8 million schools would and students would be able to benefit.
The project will also go to strengthening the ministry and helping them to improve monitoring and implementation of the program. But how do you ensure that these funds aren't being misused and they're actually going to the children who are promised this education?
So in this particular case, once you have already, when you go through these assessment and then identify the gaps and identify weaknesses, we provide technical assistance to do that. That's the first step. The second step is that once the project is under implementation, you don't transfer the whole money. You establish what is called special accounts. And these have small amounts of funds which can be used at the township level, and then those are monitored. And then there's reporting, financial reporting, which is done at each of these steps. So yes, we do take that into account, the issues related to transparency, issues related to proper financial reporting. That is part of our supervisory role. So while the ultimate responsibility is the government as the implementing agency, we monitor in terms of how the funds flow and ensure that the funds are used for the purposes they're intended.
Observers may note that the World Bank is pledging $80 million into this nationwide education scheme, but at the same time, the International Finance Corporation, the bank's financial arm, is also pledging $80 million as seed money to the Shangri-La hotels in Burma. How can it be that these two disparate entities come to deserve the same amount of funding?
Well, the thing is, and I think that the bank is putting 80 million in education. We are putting another 80 million in grants for the community-driven development. We are putting 140 million for electricity. We are putting 30 million for public financial management. We're putting a 30 million for telecom. And all this, you can't look at it as one project alone. We are doing a lot of work, and so is IFC. It is extremely important for a country which is under transition, where it's 70% of its population live in rural areas. Poverty rates are quite high. If they need to reduce their poverty, they cannot completely depend on the public sector. They cannot completely depend on the government. They have to attract private sector. And private sector are going to bring investment, not only investments, but in terms of knowledge. They're being shut away for such a long time. Here is an opportunity that they will be able to create the environment for responsible private sector to come in and to be able, so the service sector is an important part of that.
Now, the World Bank is funding a community-driven development project. Tell me a bit more about this and what you're hoping to achieve with this.
Well, this is our first activity in Myanmar. It is a grant, $80 million grant from from IDA, the International Development Association Fund, and this mainly finances community-driven development in line with what the government, as part of the reforms of bottoms-up development, rural-based development. So this particular CDD project goes through a community participatory process whereby in each of the state and regions in Myanmar, the poorest township is selected, and then and each of the villages and village tracts in that poor township benefit through this CDD program. So approximately each village, if you take an average, it's about $27,000 for each village, and the community decides what they would want in terms of infrastructure upgrading, in terms of water supply, sanitation, building access pathways. And I went and visited recently, 2 weeks back, I was in Chin State, and this is the Chin State, Tarantri and Shan State have been the first three states which have been chosen for the CDD project, considering they are one of the poorest states. And so I was in Kampalet. Kampalet's it's about 6-8 hours drive from Bagan, and Kampalet Township is benefiting through the CDD project. There are about 97 projects in the township. And mainly, most of them were these small projects where villages, village elders and the community jointly choose on what they want. And there is a menu of activities. I went to visited about 5 or 6 villages, and some of them you had to walk for about 40 minutes or 40 each way to reach these villages. They were extremely remote. But you can see the impact in terms of the process, that getting communities first time for them to take part and be responsible for the choices rather than it being sent as someone tells but decides for them.
Now, you've also faced some criticism with regards to the project for being poorly implemented, for failing to consult local communities in a meaningful way, or for not translating into ethnic languages or ensuring those with limited education would be able to understand. This goes against World Bank guidelines. Would you be able to comment on these criticisms?
Of course, it's not going to be perfect. We're just starting this work. We are learning on each of these activities you go. So even during these meetings, what is great is that each of these projects, as part of the process, there is a grievance mechanism where communities themselves can say if something is not going well, or if they come up with some suggestions, they can bring it up to the committee. This is being implemented by the Department of Rural Development, and so there are areas where if something is not going well, they bring it up, and then DRD takes care of it. So I certainly don't think that this is going to be perfect as it starts. We are going through a process of learning, and it's first time these types of activities are being implemented.
Now, another World Bank project is the Telecom Sector Reform Project, which aims to improve the environment for telecommunications sector and expand coverage into rural areas. Tell me, what is the money going towards here, and how is this project being rolled out?
Well, this project, it's mainly on strengthening the capacity of the Ministry of MPT and the Ministry of Telecom. It also has a component which helps in increasing access to mobile technology, to mobile phones in remote areas. And remote areas generally are the poorer areas here. And this has a direct impact on connectivity in terms of the population, poorer population, and particularly some in these areas. So it contributes to that universal access fund which the government is putting together to ensure that all parts of the country are connected. most of the time, the private sector is much more active in kind of the urban areas, and then so this project helps in ensuring that there is access in these remote areas. The telecom sector is always looked at as kind of the low hanging fruit in some sense, because it has an impact so quickly. It can have an impact on a population at large.
A group of 61 Burmese and ethnic civil society organisations, they published a letter that claimed you had not carried out adequate risk and security assessments. Could you address their concerns?
Well, that's as I had mentioned, that we welcome the government in being very, very transparent. They have said that they are going to be having consultations, public consultations. Again, the consultations is an ongoing process. Once as part of the implementation, consultations takes place too. Consultations is an ongoing process, and we encourage that. And consultations is done by the government. Certainly, we bring best practices. We ensure that our guidelines in terms of consultations, in terms of our safeguard policies, are adhered to.
Now, also, the group urged you to push for legal reforms that they feel must precede Telecom's expansion. Their worries include data protection, online security and surveillance, but the World Bank dismissed these claims as secondary concerns. I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
Look, as I had mentioned, that the rules and regulations which the ministry is going through, they are preparing it. They are taking best practices. We welcome that. We welcome also the commitment on part of the government, saying that they're going to be consulting with the other stakeholders, including CSOs, and that is a welcome thing, and that is something which they have committed to do. And I mean, I don't see what else what you expecting from the bank side. We can bring these best practices to play.
Now, the US Campaign for Burma has recently called for a suspension of a project linked to Mr. Serge Pun, who is owner of Yoma Bank and several construction firms. The rights group are concerned that the the Yoma Equity Project, which the IFC is proposing a grant of $30 million towards, will be able to forego certain due diligence measures and safeguards. Now, in view of the fact that Mr. Pun and Yoma have been on the US sanctions list, what measures are in place to assure transparency and accountability in this case?
Look, what I can say is that what IFC is trying to do is to attract private sector into this country, and as I mentioned earlier, there's a huge need to create jobs in Myanmar, and it has to be in sectors such as in manufacturing and in micro enterprises, so attracting, creating, helping in terms of funding some of these activities, but more importantly, helping the government in ensuring that there's an attractive environment for private sector, private investments, both local and international, come in, is important, and that's what IFC does.
So in this respect, how does the World Bank and the IFC decide who to fund and how to fund?
We do due diligence. We do due diligence in every activity which we do, right? And like I had mentioned to you, there are these assessments which you do. In the financial sectors, you do an assessment. If you go into any type of intervention which we finance, we would do a due diligence, which has, and after that is the only way we would go into the next step. So that is being done on everything which we do.
There's been a lot of concerns over IFC's investment projects, and I just wondered, to what extent has the bank's financial commitment to Burma outpaced its commitment to caution and poverty alleviation?
No, our commitment is to poverty alleviation. All which we do here, that is our goal. We have twin goals. It is to reduce absolute poverty and to improve shared prosperity, and that's our goal. and that all the activities which we do are looked at through those prism of those twin goals.
Now, the World Bank has launched an agricultural development support project that supports irrigation, farm and technical services with the aim to increase crop yields. Could you tell me a bit more about this project?
Yeah, this particular project is certainly, I mean, agriculture being the mainstay, if you will, in Myanmar, and where 70% of its population live in rural areas, and agriculture being the main activity. We are providing support from on agriculture, both in terms of improving the infrastructure in terms of irrigation systems to support increasing crop yields, to provide technical assistance in terms of to farmers. So and it is in areas which, again, looking at it, which will have maximum impact on poverty alleviation.
Now, a big concern regarding agricultural projects that sort of pave the way for private investment is that it could lead to land grabs, forced evictions and human rights abuses. Could you tell me how the World Bank will address these issues?
Well, we have again, I bring this issue of safeguard policies that, and they need to, whatever type of projects which we finance, they would need to adhere to our safeguard policies. And issues related to land and resettlement issues are part of our safeguard policies, and which will need to be followed. And we help, of course, based on experiences from other places, how these have been done. And that's our comparative advantage, is to bring experiences from other countries, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what are some of the problems which are faced, and how to ensure that those types of problems are not.
Mr. Shankar, thank you very much for speaking to me. Thank you.